Well, I want to say thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight, I have Mr. Chris Holden. He's our city manager. And he also, I have Barry Lacey as well joining me. And he is the Executive Director of Financial Strategy and Sustainability. So I really want to say thank you for joining me tonight. And I know that this is a topic that residents have been asking for. Again, we're talking really about the topics tonight is our economic recovery. How has COVID impacted our city? So that's going to be the topic. We can talk a little bit about infrastructure, and as well, we'll also, any of the questions that residents have for you. I ask that you can put them in there, and then we'll get right to them. But first of all, again, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining me. And to my residents out there, thank you for chiming in tonight as well. Again, I just ask that any of the questions are to topic, because that's what we are discussing tonight. And if we can't answer them, again, I can get them back with a response at a later time. So first of all, Chris, I'm going to start with you. I think your story for the city is a great one. And I mean, for many residents, I know you came out to my first, when I was first elected, you came out when we were actually able to do these meetings in person. And the CFO at that time came out with you, and we had a great discussion with the residents. So here we are again at year one in my second term, doing the same thing. And so I love your story, and I really want to hear, I know you started with the city many years ago, and kind of have gone through different areas and have had a very good understanding, and now to become city manager. So I really would like you to share that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for inviting me, and thanks for inviting Barry along tonight. I was going to mention that, yes, we did this over 4 years ago, and here we are back doing it tonight. In terms of my career with the city, I've been very fortunate. I started with the city when I was 16 years old as a lifeguard. I've only ever had one employer. It's the city of Regina. Not many people can say that. And I'm also someone that, always has a lot of aspirations, motivation, etc. So although I've worked for the city for, well, it's 43 years now, I've had some fantastic opportunities. I'd say that, as a lifeguard and going to university, always worked for the city. And then I would say I started my professional career in 1986. And I started as a recreation center manager at actually at the North Highland Rec Center. It doesn't exist anymore. And then I went to the Albert Scott Community Center, which has been demolished. And we now have the Mummy-Waiataton Center and Scott Collegiate. So my career goes on and on. I've worked in probably 8 or 9 different departments. Of course, for the last 5 years, I've had the privilege of being city manager. And prior to that, I was the director of communications. And prior to that, I was director of community services for 8 years. And prior to that, I was the director of parks and open space for several years. So I've had lots and lots of opportunity, lots of knowledge and exposure to the organization. And it's really been a privilege to serve the residents of Regina. A lot of us that work at the city, we care about our community, we're passionate about our community, and we're there to make sure that we can deliver programs and services each and every day and make the quality of life better. And I know there's times we frustrate residents, but that's going to happen. We're a large organization with over 2,800 employees. But we are driven to, deliver the services reliably each and every day. And obviously there's lots of excitement ahead as we come out of COVID and we move to recovery. And I'm sure we'll answer a few questions about, what those opportunities will look like and what some new infrastructure development may look like. So it's been a blast, and it's not over yet.
Okay, no, that's, it's not over yet. But again, thank you for that. And I really appreciate the work that you do in your leadership. So I'd like to ask Barry Lacey, who is the Executive Director. Thank you again for joining me tonight as well. And you're the Director of Financial Strategy and Sustainability. That's a long title, CFO and every other thing dealing with numbers. So Barry, I just want to, again, just if you can just, how long you've been with the city and just a little bit about, to introduce yourself as well.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here tonight, Councillor Bresciani. Good evening, everybody that's tuning in. As Councillor Bresciani noted, my name is Barry Lacey, and I'm the Executive Director of Financial Strategy and Sustainability for the City of Regina. So what that means is if you think of what a Chief Financial Officer does for an organization, budget and financial accounting functions. So I'm responsible for those here at the City of Regina, and also a number of other things thrown in as well, including procurement, overall oversight of the city's land development and real estate holdings, as well responsible for the city's facilities from an operational and maintenance perspective here at the city, and as well assessment and property taxation and utility billing would also fall within my portfolio. Compared to Chris, I am very, very new at the city here. I'm just past my three-year mark with the City of Regina. However, previous to that, I spent 30 years in the provincial civil service. And I'm certainly very much enjoying my 3 years here at the city. There's a lot of similarities between the provincial level of government and municipal level, but there is also a lot of significant differences as well. And I think one of the key ones that I've really come to recognize and appreciate is the municipality governance structure is much closer to the people than it is at the provincial level. So much more in touch, and it's much closer with the residents of Regina than at the province with the citizens of Saskatchewan. So welcome to be here. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Barry. That's great. Yes, we do hear from the public. We are closer to the people. You're exactly right. And we do get, of course, more people reaching out. And I think that's why we get to be the voice, and then are able to kind of take their concerns and their bouquets forward as well. So, so I do want to, I think we could start asking people to put in questions if they do. We have a couple people have joined us as well. And I'm seeing a few of the comments start to come in. So, when I first thought about the topics, the first thing at hand is, we are still in a pandemic. And we've been in this pandemic for almost a year now. And so I know that we have had a loss of revenue. And I guess the first, question is, during the pandemic, what were some of the things that, we did as a city that kind of impacted that? So we didn't charge people. So it helped our citizens kind of get through the pandemic. And who would like to take that one?
So I'll start,
Sure.
and then I'll let Barry take the difficult parts.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, so it is almost 1 year since the pandemic hit our community, and of course, with the pandemic and the almost immediate onset of a health crisis, we took a number of measures in terms of closing city facilities, reducing ridership on transit. We cut back on some of the services that we provided to citizens if we had to enter their homes, for example. So there was lots of things operationally that we did in terms of making sure that we were protecting our employees and that we were protecting citizens. And then, of course, we sent a lot of our employees home. So we were one of the first organizations that ever adopted Microsoft Office in the cloud. We weren't using the technology to the extent that we had the ability to, but we sent literally almost 700 employees home overnight. And then we looked at how we could adjust services. So there was lots of things that we continued to need to do. We needed to continue to, issue permits, licenses, all those kinds of things. And we moved to online service in a lot of areas. But with a lot of those reductions and closures, obviously there were impacts on revenue. So we had no revenue coming in our culture, recreation facilities. Our transit ridership was down significantly. And of course, that had impact on our residents. So things like extending the payment deadlines for property taxes, extending the deadlines for utility payments, those kinds of things. So we took a lot of action to make sure that we were understanding of the financial challenges that residents were facing. And of course, there was a response both at the provincial level and the federal level in terms of, the CERB payments for people that ended up being out of work, all kinds of changes that we made as an organization. And then, of course, over time, we were able to open up some of our facilities, recreation facilities, but of course, there were still restrictions. And we were able to move and reopen our transit and increase ridership. But of course, then, the masks and mandatory masks to make sure that we were, protecting our employees and protecting citizens that were interacting. City Hall was closed for an extended period and then it reopened with, again, all kinds of restrictions in terms of the number of people. A lot of our residents had transitioned to do business online, but there are still a number of people that want to do their transactions in person. They want to make their payments in person. So I think we'll always have that balance of being able to access services online, but also be able to do business in person. And the reality is, I don't think the businesses anywhere are going to be the same. People have adopted, they've changed. Whether you're a local commercial business or whether you're a restaurant, everyone has found new creative ways in which to deliver services and make sure that you can continue to deliver those services. And maybe I just ask Barry to talk specifically about some of the financial pieces and the impact that it's had on the city and some of the direct actions we took in terms of managing what was a significant projected shortfall in revenue.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. Barry?
No, thank you. So maybe I'll just touch on a couple of, additional pieces. I think people are aware that, we extended the tax payment deadline until September 30th and suspended penalties on utility billings for late payments and utility billings up to September 30th. And even with that September 30th deadline, we continue to work hard with residents on if they need repayment plans, et cetera, to work with them to try and find a way to make that work for residents. And before I kind of get to the financial impacts, the other thing I'd just like the opportunity to highlight is City Council also approved a $2 million Regina Economic Recovery Grant Program for businesses. And its intent really is to help businesses that are trying to stay open, find a different way of doing business and surviving in COVID, whether that's personal protective equipment or perhaps opening up a drive-through or a curbside service where they've had to do some different things. And there's the opportunity for them and still that opportunity there for businesses to apply for this grant program where grants are provided up to $50,000 under that program. So, Chris had mentioned there was a number of facilities that we had closed down briefly and programming, and we've seen a significant decrease in ridership on transit as well, and a number of other things. So we projected that the impact of actually COVID financially on the city was about $15.5 million last year as far as a negative impact. Early in the spring in April, we knew and we suspected there would be a significant financial impact. So we had worked with council to take a number of actions proactively to try to mitigate that impact. And so there was a number of actions that were taken back in April, including suspending the filling of vacant positions other than positions that were essential or critical to city operations, ensuring that wherever we could, reducing consulting and contracting costs. And obviously there would have been less travel. And so we're making sure we are capturing those costs as well. And through those efforts, we as a city last year achieved savings of about $18 million. So essentially what that means is that we have been able to cover off that negative $15 million impact that we saw. And we do expect to run a very slight surplus for last year, but essentially I call it a break-even actual financial results. And in large part, it was because of those actions that were taken by the city and council to address, I think, the negative impacts of COVID that not only we're seeing as a city, but many residents and businesses are also seeing.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the big things that we heard. And I think when council did move forward with that $2 million to try and find some solutions and support to the businesses, I mean, that was one I know that I had heard from many organizations in that, you know, they were very appreciative of that. As well as trying to find other funding as well to help them mitigate that so their business could stay open. So, I mean, it was, again, just another way that the city was listening to do their part during this COVID. But, you know, again, so one of the things that, Barry, I know that when we talk about, you know, that we found those savings and we could kind of, I guess, move on and kind of reduce our one of the things that we didn't do though was reduce the services. Is that accurate? Like, I want to make sure that and I know that council was very I think had a very strong voice that we have to get through this, and I mean the city does have about 60 different line of businesses that we offer and we do, but I know that council was very clear that, you know, whatever we have to do, I get that we have to skim things down and skinny it down, but there was, I know that would you say, was there an impact of some services or just elaborate if you can a little bit?
Yeah. So maybe I'll say a few things, and perhaps the city manager also might have something to add. But you know, I would say it would be my perspective that overall, certainly there were some city services that were impacted, as Chris noted, but they were due to the public health orders. So things like having to not open some of our rec facilities, at least initially. And even now, even today, there's limits on the amount of activity that we can allow in some of our recreational centers, etc. And but outside of things like that, which is basically the city responding to public health orders, I think the city's tried very hard that normal levels of service are continued to be provided to city residents. And I don't know if you have anything else to add on that, Chris.
So yeah, the only thing I would add just supports what Barry has said. And I think, you know, the city as an employer has been very fortunate in that, you know, many of the services that we provide are core, they are essential. So, you know, whether it's water and sewer, you know, maintenance of our streets, our winter road maintenance, those sorts of things. Other than a bit of a slow recall of some of our casual employees when we started to open up in the spring, all of the services that we provide, we've continued to provide. So you know, city employees have been fortunate in that they have had their, you know, employment maintained, and they've had the ability, many of them, to work from home in a very safe environment. But those folks that have been working from home have been, you know, taking calls through Service Regina. They've been processing permits. They've been processing applications. So people that are at home are doing their job that they would be doing if they were sitting in an office at City Hall or an office in one of our other locations. So it's been very good for our employees in terms of being able to continue working in a very challenging time when not everybody has had that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with you, Chris. And I think one of the big things is that the city wears two hats, right? The city wears the hat where we actually need to protect our workers and our staff, and that we also have to protect the general public. And so, you know, again, kudos to the city staff that were the essential workers. They were the workforce that were, you know, the bus drivers and police and the fire, like they had to continue working. And yes, there were some that could work at home, which was a great benefit, but many had to continue those services for us. So there is a question, and here it says, what is the plan to see the downtown recover quickly and effectively?
So I'll take that one.
Sure.
There's a number of things I think that need to happen in order to, get the downtown kickstarted again. And one, of course, is we have all the crown corporations and ourselves, and we have the majority of our employees working from home. So obviously, when it's safe to do so, we need to get those employees back into the office environments. Those people, shop on their lunch hour. They go to the local restaurants over their lunch hours and coffee breaks, etc. So that's a key piece, is getting employees back into some of the office locations. And yet it will probably never be the same. I mean, I think, the ability that some individuals may work from home, and then there'll be some that will be a balance of work from home, work from the office. But I think that's a key. The other piece is the city's worked with a number of partners to develop what's called a city center core partnership framework, which is going to come to council in March. And what that has done is it's brought the Regina Exhibition Association, who has the responsibility for Real and the Everaz grounds, and the city, of course, that has Mosaic Stadium. We have the Taylor Field neighborhood. We have the yards, the old rail yards, and then, of course, we have the warehouse district, and we have the Regina downtown bid. So those organizations have all come together and said, what can we do collectively to try and attract events, activities back into that downtown core? And, those are organizations that have always felt that they were competing with each other to a certain extent. And there's been a lot of discussion to say, what fits most appropriately at this location or that location? So there are some things that should occur on the plaza and in Victoria Park, and that's that they will be coordinated. Other things that makes more sense on the Everaz grounds. And then, of course, with that, it's also, what does development look like? And what does growth opportunity look like? And of course, development is just a little bit slower right now. So, some of the property that we have in the downtown, some of the vacant properties or the temporary parking lots, it's going to take a little bit of time for our economy to kickstart again, so that people start to invest. But really, everyone is going to come out of COVID at the same time. So, we need to be able to compete with, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, all across Western Canada, and even into other parts of North America. So, we've got some very talented folks in terms of, the staff that are bringing events and activities to Everaz. And of course, many other event organizers and planners in Regina. So that's another piece. A lot of that hinges, though, on our ability to have large gatherings again. And that's going to be managed after, of course, vaccines have rolled out, and of course, some of those restrictions in terms of the size of gatherings. I mean, we all heard last week that the Western Hockey League is going to have a 24-game season. They're going to be a hub in Regina. I think that's great for the city. Unfortunately, there's no fans at that point, but it does demonstrate that as a community, we can come together and provide those kinds of services. We're all waiting as to whether there'll be a CFL season. And we all heard from last year that the CFL needs a certain number of fans in the stadium to make it financially viable. So, it's unknown at this point, but I think people have their fingers crossed that we'll see a CFL. And those are the types of things that, again, will assist and support downtown activation in terms of getting hotels, people staying in our hotels. That's one industry that has been absolutely devastated. And of course, restaurants and bars, etc.
No, I would absolutely agree with you. Barry, was there anything you wanted to add, or did Chris cover it?
Sorry, no, I think Chris did a pretty good job covering it. So
okay, yeah. I would agree, but and you're right, Chris, the hotel industry has been hit, and with many people working from home, it does, there's no reason for people to go downtown. And I would agree, though, that as soon as we can start to gather, that's going to, again, it's either the farmers market and just getting people downtown to, come for a reason, even if it's going to the restaurant, sitting on a patio. Right now, that's really, again, not happening. So I do hope that that is that will be the next. And I think after all this, people are going to want to gather. I just, again, we don't know when that will be. So there is a question from Alysia asking, we're finally on the craft beer map. Does the city recognize the opportunity for future craft beer tourism? Is that one that we want to take, or do we want to, and I know that the craft beer industry, the local craft beers have been asking about being able to, partake at the stadium and have, and I know that there's been some discussions there with local, kind of local beer companies being able to partake in our communities in somewhat. And do you know where kind of discussions are with that at all, Chris? Or
So, craft beer, of course, it is such a big opportunity, and it's absolutely a large tourism attraction in terms of people travel to destinations that they want to go and sample all of the craft beer opportunities. So in Regina, particular to the stadium, of course, the riders manage and own the pouring rights for the stadium.
Yeah.
But of course, when the stadium opened, there was a lot of interest for craft beer. And I know that between the Craft Beer Association and the riders and Real, who operates the stadium on our behalf, there have been lots of conversations in terms of, how can we respect, obviously, the investment that Molson makes, to have the pouring rights, but also give the, I guess, the fans what they want. And they want the opportunity to be able to have, local craft beers. They also want to be able to have local food and local flavor. So, that's another piece that Real does quite well, is they have a program called Sask Flavors, and they're trying to introduce more and more of their food service that is sourced from Saskatchewan producers. And there are more and more craft beer, distillers or brewers opening. The warehouse, there's a fair number of them. We have a few in kind of, what I'd call, they're not off the beaten track a little bit, and they're quite successful. So I think you're going to see more and more. But to the question, does the city see it as really a tourism opportunity? I think that's where EDR, which is another subsidiary of the city, a corporation of the city, they also manage tourism. But I think between tourism and hotels, these are the kind of things, these are the opportunities, I think, to how do you reopen the community when the restrictions start to lift and we can have larger gatherings. We've got to create offerings where you come to Regina, you've got these opportunities to be able to sample a craft beer. My goodness, maybe you can take in a rider game and you'll book a couple of nights in a hotel, and all of a sudden we're starting to really generate some economic activity in the community, which is good for everybody involved.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And Alysia, that's a great question, and I like it that that's something that through as Chris has said, through Economic Development Regina, I would love to see a little tour going from one to the next and kind of doing a little craft beer tour in our city. So something that can be a takeaway for us as well. So I like that, and thank you for the question. So, I guess one of the things as we move into the 2021 budget, and people have said, the impacts that we have, and I want to first go back because in our last term, I know, Chris, we had said as a council, we want you to find some efficiencies within the city of Regina. And in that term, I think there was about 18 or $20 million that was found. And there were some big decisions that were made. And I remember the discussions that came about at that time. And so, I mean, and I think that's really important for people to hear, because I don't think we tell our story very well, but there were efficiencies found within the organization, and a restructuring actually, right? And I think we moved the city forward in that. Did you want to elaborate on that, what was kind of done in that findings, just briefly?
Sure. So, the city is committed to continuous improvement. So, at the end of the day, we are funded by taxpayers. And taxpayers have an expectation that they're getting value for those taxes. So in my time as city manager, when we announce our 2021 budget, over the past 4 years, we'll have found $20 million in cost savings. In 2018, we did a restructuring of the organization. We looked at all of our out-of-scope management, and made sure that we had, the right positions and the right number of leaders to be able to direct the workforce to deliver the services. At the end of the day, that exercise in itself reduced the number of executive team members we had. It reduced the number of directors that we had. It reduced the number of managers that we had, and that reduced our management expenses by $3 million. We took that $3 million and council decided to put that into a recreation capital program. So, quality of life is important for so many of us, whether it's our parks, our pathways, our winter activities, and we're putting more and more effort into winter programs and a winter strategy. But we are constantly looking for ways to ensure that we're delivering the services in the most cost-effective manner. We're looking at opportunities around technology. Is there new and a better way to do it? And sometimes it takes an investment to move into a new innovative way, especially if it requires new technology or new software. But at the end of the day, the longer term is that we're going to be reducing our expenses. So we're continually looking for ways to make ourselves more efficient and reduce our expenses. And I think that over the last 4 years we've done a very good job of that, and I think we need to, because at the end of the day, I've worked for the city for a long time. I live in this community. My family, some of them are in Regina, some of my daughters, and at the end of the day, we've got to be respectful of. There's only everybody pays taxes and there's one taxpayer. So whether that's federal, provincial, or municipal. So it's a consideration that we need to do our part to make sure that taxes, and nobody likes to see a tax increase, but that they are reasonable.
Absolutely. No, and I when we talk about a tax increase, we know right off the hop, and Barry can, we have 0.45 for the stadium, right? And we have a 0.5 for the recreation that the council has put towards to go to recreation. So we know that right off the hop is there. And then we still have our police, right, on top of that as well. And then, whatever after is increased in services from there. Would that be accurate, Barry?
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Bresciani. You got that, hit that nail right on the head. You're right. When I think about the city's budget, the general fund budget, really there's three key components to it. One is some of those, a couple of those dedicated increases you've talked about as it relates to the stadium and improving our recreational infrastructure, the 0.45 and the 5. And then we have the police, the Regina Police Service is part of the city's budget. They represent about 20% of our budget overall. And then the rest is what I call civic operations, everything else that we do, whether it's parks, cleaning the roads in the spring, winter road maintenance, you name it. It all falls under that bucket. And, just echoing what I would just, kind of echo and reiterate everything Chris has said around the importance of us continuing to look for ways to be efficient, to find savings. A key objective of the city's official community plan, kind of that guiding document, is to ensure that we as a city have long-term financial viability. And so there's a number of components around that piece, but certainly one of those components that I think we just need to continue to keep our eye on and work on that every year is continue to find ways to find savings, do things more efficiently. That needs just to continue to happen as we move forward to achieve that longer term goal.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I know that, when we talk about over, the next, I think 5 years, we know that the city will invest probably close to like $1 billion to renew and align the aging infrastructure, which has been, I know, a big topic of conversation. And of course, supporting the long-term growth. And, Barry, I think that's the balance that you try and match is the long-term viability, balancing the affordability, and then also, for our city to be sustainable.
I would at 100% agree with that. A lot of what the city does and the services the city provides, the foundational piece of that is kind of the infrastructure that goes with that, whether that's water pipes, sewer pipes, roads, rec facilities, you name it. In fact, there's over a 500,000 unique assets that the city owns that supports the services that are delivered. And if we were to replace all of those assets today, it'd be about $9 billion that you would need to spend to replace those assets. But assets, like we all know, whether it's our house or our car, age, and need to have maintenance and or at times need to be replaced. And if you don't, do that maintenance down the road, it just causes you bigger problems. And so, when we talk about long-term financial viability, I think that's one of the challenges we have as a city here is what I call our infrastructure deficit, right? We're not the only municipality having that challenge. I think it's a common issue across Canada. When you look at the 3 levels of government, municipalities have the most infrastructure of all 3 levels of government in how they deliver services to. And
the smallest budget, I'll just say that.
The smallest budget as well, yes. And so I think what you've seen is, over the years, many years ago when the assets were newer, perhaps not as much was put into maintaining them as we should have. And so to some extent, we're playing catch up now. And that has created what I call an infrastructure deficit. And we do need those assets to continue to deliver services. And I do think over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been some really good effort made by City Council to make sure we're starting to make those investments and make the right investments to catch up. But that does require an investment, which I think puts pressure on that balance. When I talk about long-term financial viability, you have general operations, but you also have infrastructure that you need to maintain. And so for us to achieve as a city long-term financial viability, it is a balance, I think, that we are always mindful of and juggling between affordability. And affordability relates to taxation, relates to the amount of fees we charge for city services versus being able to sustain services that the Regina residents are looking for from the city. And so I know that's a constant balancing act that we do every year, and we try to think long-term about that as well. And I know that's a balancing act that City Council also, struggles with necessarily, but it is something that certainly is top of mind when we bring budgets forward. And I think this year is going to be a challenging year as well. And we're very cognizant of, where where we're at and where business is at and where residents are at as we put the budget together for 2021 and try to strike that balance.
Mhm. And I think when you balance that with the COVID impacts that we've had, I think that's where some tough decisions are going to have to be made around the council table. But you know, and many people may not realize, but even for our utilities, for our water, I mean, the infrastructure there from just pumping the water from Buffalo Pound is 60 kilometers away. And I mean, that in itself is just another, you know, infrastructure piece. If people can just understand that it's not just a short distance away. And, you know, think about the infrastructure in just that, getting the water to the taps, right? So there's a lot more to it than I think sometimes we realize. And I, you know, people don't see it, you know, they see a tax increase. They know their taxes are going up, but they always say, I haven't got anything more for my tax increase, right? And again, that's also because we're balancing also the aging infrastructure that also has to go to a part of that. So I think that's a very important point. We do have a question here in regards to, can we increase transparency regarding our municipal anti-poverty strategies / grants coming, coming through and eventually out of COVID? She said, I think it's more important than ever, but the information is not always easily accessible looking through the eyes of the general public, in her humble opinion. So just increasing the transparency regarding our municipal anti-poverty strategies and grants. So does someone want to take that? If that would be, is that more, and it's a takeaway, for sure we'll take that away, as to, you know, is there more that we could do in that as far as, you know, putting them out there? Does Chris, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you know, the city has a number of grants. There's an affordable housing grant, obviously, where the city funds per door in terms of development. Through our community investment grants, there's a number of social organizations that we support that provide, you know, programs and services in our community. And to your point, I think we will take that away and make sure that, you know, we can make sure that that information is readily available. I know some of that is on our website, regina.ca, but sometimes it's hard to find.
Yes.
But I think, you know, the question really highlights, you know, COVID-19, as challenging it has been for everyone. I think it has really highlighted, you know, the need to take care of the most vulnerable people in our communities.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know, whether it's investment from the federal government, the provincial government, or even the leadership that the city has taken in certain areas. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic actually to shift that priority, but it is absolutely changing the way that municipalities look at, you know, community safety and well-being. You know, council has recently just created the community wellness committee, and I think shortly there'll be a diversity and inclusion committee. Yeah. So council, not to speak for yourself, councillor, but council as a collective has said, you know what, we've got to do a better job at making sure that we are caring for the residents in our community and all of our residents. Yes. So that's a priority for council, and you're going to see, you know, the city's just now creating a community safety and well-being framework. Yes. And that has a whole bunch of partners coming around the table to have conversations, and that there'll be recommendations to council. So you're going to see the city, I think, play a much stronger role than it has in the past, in where it can take a stronger role in terms of, you know, tackling some of the social issues and challenges that, you know, residents are facing in our community.
Yeah. No, and just to go add on to that, Chris, you're exactly right. And that was one of the reasons that committee was struck. And I think that we were finding that we talked about our homelessness. We talked about, again, you know, the social issues that are affecting people, but couldn't put it all together. and how we were going to tackle some of these issues. And some of those are, also affect how our police are addressing some of these. So I think it's a real good start to figure out how are we going to make sure that we can address some of the issues collectively. We may not be able to do everything alone, but it's bringing in the stakeholders to have that conversation of how can we move that forward and look at some of the housing. One of the things that was a question was Mayor Masters has committed to reduce overall city expenses and also look for operational efficiencies. This goes back to the efficiency review that we were talking about a little bit earlier. But, he indicated it's only been a few months with new leadership, but he would like to know in the short term, what's in the short term and the longer term plans that will address those two areas that will make the city much more efficient going forward. And, this is just came to council here at executive yesterday. And I know that was something Mayor Masters ran on in her campaign. And I know, Chris, when it was raised, you were very open and said, this is something absolutely we will be doing. And the last, I think, third party review was done in 2004. We've done a lot of inside, but 2004. But do you just want to talk just briefly about the next steps of that?
Sure. So Councillor Bresciani is absolutely right. It was at exec committee yesterday. It goes to council next Wednesday. But what this will look like is that we will engage a third-party consultant. That consultant will work with council. They will select 6 to 8 service areas that they want to put under a microscope and take a very deep dive and take a look at how we're delivering the services. Are we delivering them in an effective and efficient way? Are we delivering them in a manner that supports kind of leading practice from other municipalities across the country? And of course, those recommendations will come to council towards the end of 2021. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there's going to be a community task force, which will be chaired by one of the councillors and a community leader. There'll be a committee of about 10 to 12 people. They will engage in some conversations with nonprofit organizations, business owners, and they'll look for opportunities to say, what are the pain points in terms of our interactions with the city? What are some of the opportunities beyond the city that we're going to need to see in Regina if we are going to be viable in terms of economic recovery coming out of COVID? Mm-hmm. And of course, if that group identifies some opportunities, then that will get fed back to the efficiency consultant. And of course, administratively, we're there to support the community task force, and we're there to make sure that the third-party consultant gets all the information that they need, all of the data, so that they can do their research, their analysis. And then, of course, those recommendations will come to council. And then at that point, council will decide the actions and steps that they want to take, and then direct through myself as city manager, the administration to implement. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the direction that Mayor Masters and council is taking is they said, let's do this first phase, and then let's stop and look at how successful we are at implementing. Yeah. Reviews are easy to do. The implementation is challenging because it may result in a requirement to maybe enhance a service or adjust a service level, decrease a service level, or I can tell you, I think there's some services that cities delivers that we deliver because historically we delivered them. But it's very hard to stop a service. So I like the approach that the mayor and council is pursuing, and that is let's do this first phase. Let's take a look at see what what we can implement, what kind of savings we can realize, and once we've proven it, then we can continue on with future phases, and those phases may then be led by the administration, and then with a validation through a third-party consultant. So it's going to be an exciting, 8-9 months as we move to the end of the year in terms of going through the efficiency review and having the conversations in the community to identify what we do well and where we need to make improvement. And as administration, we're totally open and supportive to work with the consultant and council to achieve that.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. And I would just add on, I think it's also a time to empower staff. I think it's another way to ask staff, what are they doing and what is not working and what's working. And I think that's those are the questions that kind of empower staff to, share and be a part of that conversation in those areas and look at, ways that, of course, we can find efficiencies. And it doesn't, I think people are thinking it's job loss or that kind of thing. No, it's maybe having people work doing different things, right? Moving in different directions, that kind of stuff. So there's so many great, I think, conversations that will move this forward. So I think a lot of people I've spoken to are looking forward to that first steps. So another question that's come up is Todd has indicated, I would like to give kudos to the city for clearing snow in small residential parks. So the pathways and that kind of thing, which I know I've heard a lot about. So thank you, Todd. And he encourages folks to get out during COVID and spread and utilize the parks as well. And so thank you and keep that service in the future. But he also has asked, how is the snow removal budget doing this year? And are we going to get any less, are we going to get any less snow removal dividends this year? And I think that's the question. Everything. So if we don't get snow, do we get any money back, or where does that money go, Barry?
Sorry, just trying to find my mic, put it back on. So that's a good question, actually, a timely question. With respect to the snow removal budget, I like to say that I haven't looked at it lately, but nobody's come to me worried. So I'm assuming we're still in pretty good shape. And the reality is obviously we have a snow season between now and the spring, but we also have a snow budget that we got to plan for in the fall as well. So given we're so early into the year, I'm assuming that we're probably doing okay. But that does raise actually another piece that I would just flag and that council will see in the budget in March. Late last year, actually, the group in the city that does snow removal actually brought a report to council around snow removal and was flagging that there might be an opportunity there. We've actually been underspending the budget most years for snow removal. And I think that's in part because of we're just getting less snow for whatever reason, climate change or whatever, from when that budget was established a number of years ago. So that report was brought forward to council about perhaps an opportunity to reallocate some of those funds to address other pressures the city might be facing, and perhaps look at ways in which some of the snow removal service level and activity that we do could be enhanced. And so council at the time, late last year, said, well, let's forward that to the budget and let's have that discussion when the budget comes forward, because do we maybe need those dollars to fund some other activities, or do we want to use some of them to maybe enhance the snow removal activities that we currently do? So I guess I would say on that piece, stay tuned. The budget probably is we expect the budget will come out in a couple of weeks here. And there will be an opportunity, I think, for there to be a broader discussion by council of the snow removal budget.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, Barry, thank you for that. That there was, as you indicated, a report to come to council regarding the snow maintenance and what improvements did residents want. It was a survey that actually went out to people and asked. And there was a lot that came back, and there are going to be some recommendations for increasing. And there were some options. Residents wanted to see the windows gone. They wanted to see, better, at bus stops, things like that. So there are going to be some a discussion at council for those improvements as well. And because I think that we do have, there are people that walk and they need some of the areas cleared of snow. So depending on the year, but I would absolutely agree. We have had reduced snow in the past few years, and there has been a surplus there. But I also think that we are a winter city, and it's nice when our pathways are cleared. And I've heard so much feedback. So kudos to the staff. I see them out a lot in the area doing the sidewalks as well and the park pathways. So again, great job to the staff again for being out there, so people can actually walk, as Todd said, to get out and walk during these times when people want to use our parks. So so there's a question here: are you still considering reductions to the development levies in the central area, given the infrastructure deficit that was mentioned? I remember this being a campaign issue, but concerned as a taxpayer, will we pay more for infrastructure upgrades if the levies are reduced? So talking about the levies for development in the central areas.
So that's a great question. And at the end of the day, I think the question's coming from Jana. Absolutely.
That's right.
Somebody has to pay. So, if the developer isn't paying, then definitely it's coming out of the property tax base. Part of the challenge is, some of the central area and some of the incentives, we want to encourage development. There's always that conversation about who should pay. Should the developer pay it? And should they pay 100% of it, or should it be partially funded? So there's a policy and a conversation that needs to occur there. The other opportunity is to provide some incentives, right? In terms of, the development levies are what they are, but if you're going to do, a brownfield development, then there's some opportunities around investment. So that's definitely a conversation that, the mayor introduced in her campaign. It is definitely an issue for, developers who want to, move forward with development opportunities. But at the end of the day, there's a balance in terms of how does it get paid for? And of course, you'll see you'll see economic development activities that are happening, outside of the city limits. And it's because, their development levies are so much less than ours. So, at the end of the day, we're all, development and growth is good, whether it's in the city limits or just outside the city limits. But obviously, it adds to our tax base if it's inside the city limits. So there will have to be, obviously, further discussions and policy decisions that are put in front of council. I'm not sure, Barry, if you have anything to add in that. I know you've got the real estate responsibility. So
No, thanks, Chris. I think I was thinking, is Chris going to answer that, or is he going to want me to answer it? And I think you did a much better job than I did answering it. So I 100% agree. I mean, there is that balance and that policy discussion, I think that we need to continue to have. And then I think there is also that issue, or not issue, it's about, how do you incentivize development as well? And I think those two go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for that. So, we're almost coming to 8 o'clock, but I have another question, just, I think as we move into the next budget here, as we're talking, and some of the impacts that we're going to have with the COVID. And I guess, Barry, what do you see in, kind of coming up here in this next budget process? Some of the things that are going to be some of the concerns that, and not concerns, but hard discussions at council. What are some of your thoughts there?
So, I think COVID is going to continue to impact the city's financial position going into 2021. I mean, we talked about the recreational facilities, and we can't have as many people in them as what you would see in a normal year. And, transit ridership is still done. I think that's just naturally because of COVID. And so I don't really kind of expect things to start really turning around until the second half, hopefully, of 2022. If we can get the vaccines out and get them into people, I'm very hopeful that then we'll maybe start seeing a return to, I guess, a little bit more what we would call normality. And so, that is going to be a challenge to us throughout the budget process. Now, Council at the end of last year did set aside a COVID reserve. So I think that will be helpful in allowing us to balance some of those costs against these COVID costs that we're going to continue to incur, and help us manage that. And then I think as well, that whole discussion again about balancing, affordability with sustaining services, particularly in the economic environment that we're currently in. We did provide an update to council on where we thought the budget would be going in January with respect to the 2022 budget. And as you mentioned, Councillor Bresciani, there is that 0.45 and that 0.5 with respect to the stadium and rec infrastructure that's there, and the police budget's out there as well, which is requesting council consider a little bit of an increase to their budget. I think one of the things, and Chris talked about us finding savings. One of the things that we've been working really hard on as administration, so that civic operations part of the budget, the part of the budget I think that administration really controls, that other 80%, less the police. I know that we're working really hard to try to balance that, and so that we're able to find savings and offsets to deal with any natural increases you see in your budget, whether it be to inflation or salary or whatever. And so that's what we're working really hard towards. And, I think there'll be trade-off decisions a little bit that will come to council that council will need to consider. But that's really been, I think, our goal and objective, is to try and balance the budget on the civic operations side, and any cost increases to offset them by savings, as Chris has talked about already.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. And I do know that as we move forward to the budget discussions, they're never fun. And but I mean, at the end of the day, we only have, at the end of the day, it's about providing the city services that we need to continue to provide. And in the best cases, kind of moving forward to ensure that, we have those services for people when they pay their taxes. At the end of the day, that's really, and it's a quality of life, right? And I think that's and I do want to say that, I want to say thank you to both of you for, number crunching, it's never fun. But also just for your commitment to get us through this, the COVID times. The leadership and all of the work, and I know the many, many, many stressful meetings that had to happen to keep everybody safe and keep everybody in the loop of what was happening, because it did come upon us quite fast. When you talk about 2,700 employees and trying to still keep a city going to maintain the garbage and the recycle and the water and everything else that residents want to continue and need to continue, I really want to say thank you for that. Thank you for leading us and continuing to lead us through this pandemic, and passing that on to the staff as well. And Barry, I know that you always try and make the budget as easy as possible to understand for everybody. And I really appreciate that, because at the end of the day, I wish more residents would have the opportunity to have a discussion. And that's why I wanted to, when do you ever get to sit down, have a conversation with the city manager and the CFO that looks after the finances? So, I want to say thank you. And I know that, Chris, you are on holidays. Well, 1 or 2 days, and you joined me tonight. So I want to say thank you for that. I know you're normally in Mexico, but that's okay. And Barry, I just want to say, you're still at work. And I just want to say thank you again, because again, it's just, that's about the commitment of staff that I know that we're so grateful to have at the City of Regina. So again, thank you for joining me. Thank you to my residents that were able to join in tonight. We had some really great questions. And again, this will be, people can view it at a later time as well. But, again, it's about all of us, continuing to be vigilant to get us through pandemic, so we can enjoy those rider games and everything else that we want to want to do for the summer. And it's just kind of, I think, remaining, getting us through this piece, and I know we will. So again, thank you. And I don't know, Chris, anybody, if you guys want to have any closing remarks, or are you good? But just an opportunity to serve our city, which you indicated. I really appreciate that.
No, just thank you for inviting us. It's great to be able to talk to residents and, encourage people at any point, if they have questions, to reach out. You can always call 777-7000, and, we'll make sure that we get a response to issue, concern, or just a general question that you have. So thanks for allowing, Barry and myself to join you tonight. It's one of the better parts of being able to, get away from the day-to-day and talk to residents and answer some of their questions. So thank you.
You're welcome. And virtually, I know it's not the best, but it's still, it's better than nothing. So I do appreciate that. So again, stay safe and stay warm. And to my residents, thank you as well. And we'll connect at any time. And you've got my contact information if you do have any questions. So thanks again. Take care.